right, and we are rolling. Brooker, take it.
We have, I think Rolf is now our most common guest. Hey, what's this, number 3 or number 4 with Rolf?
I think this is number 3.
Yeah, this is number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
And we couldn't be more chuffed because Rolf is he's like the grandfather of strength and conditioning for me and Mike. No offense to you, Rolf, because you are looking nice and young and tanned over there. Yeah. But we have a wealth of knowledge in front of us, and Rolf, you've got some interesting things just happened. We'll see what we brush on and what we get into. But you was just mentioning about how you're using the simplification method throughout all of your training now. So you was talking about, we were ranting on for a while now. Let's keep going where you was. I mean, you mentioned about how UFC China were just brought in, what was it, 152 tests that they started testing their athletes on, and now they wanted to bring that into China. So that included that the elite level sprinters, they needed to do Cooper tests and chin-ups, and if they didn't pass that, they were getting kicked off the national team. And then you were bringing in about how you're trying to reduce basically everything. You, Randy, and Rainer, the 2 guys who you speak to the most, who are also working with some of the top athletes in the world. So let's keep going from there, shall we?
Yeah. Like I said, if we sort of look at what was happening with regards to China, it's very unfortunate that certain powers are able to sell a concept. I mean, the concept itself there's nothing wrong with, but you've got to sort of, hang on, I'm just going to close the door. Somebody's banging some meat in the kitchen.
Brooker, where are you right now? It looks like you're in a freaking villa.
I am. I'm in Sardinia, mate.
That looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. Let me tell you, it's fucking nice, especially when this morning I got a weather warning on my phone that there's flooding going on. And then over here, it's like 35 degrees. So I'm very, very happy to be here right now. It's like worse than flipping London, the weather back in Switzerland right now.
Yeah.
So go on, Rolf. What were you saying?
Yeah. So the unfortunate thing with this whole thing with the testing in China was that, unfortunately, there was a thing where the powers to be thought that more is better. So, the UFC sort of sold a bunch of testing for the UFC events that they, traditionally work with. But this was very quickly snapped up by other organizations who thought, well, we don't have a national testing, let's say a national testing scheme or whatever you want to call it for different sports. And so some bright spark up somewhere up the top there decided, well, we're gonna incorporate the same tests for every sport. So if you are sitting in a starboat, hanging in the trapeze off the port side, or if you're running 100 meters, you're doing the same physical tests. If you're a dart player, or you're a chess player, or you're a volleyball player, it's the same tests. You can see where I'm going with this. I mean, it just becomes a complete nightmare. And then as I had the esteemed pleasure of witnessing one of these testing days, you want to run forward and just grab whatever is very heavy and throwable and throw it at the guy who's heading up this thing, because it's a shit show. The way they're doing things, I mean, for example, they were doing at this specific date, they were doing a sit and reach test. And the crazy thing was that if you could actually sit and reach your toes, that was counted as being 0. So you had to get past that. Now, for many athletes, sitting in a sit and reach test and just reaching your toes is fine. It's great. There's no problem. But if that's sort of like zero, in other words, you don't get a single point unless you start getting your hands or your traveling past your toes. So in other words, we had athletes who were getting virtually, well, they were actually getting a fail, but they were negative 15 centimeters. So they were actually 15 centimeters over their toes, and yet that was deemed as having enough mobility in the hamstrings and back.
Where were they getting these metrics from? Where were they these tests? What was their process for that?
I think the UFC had a whole bunch of stuff that they were doing in Las Vegas at their test center there, and then it was sort of just brought in, and people within that organization had meetings with when they set up this big facility in Shanghai, and of course all of these metrics were being thrown around. This is how we prepare our UFC fighters, and we look at that, we look at this, we look at this. And I mean, the problem with China is that when you throw something like that out, a lot of people will just grab everything and think the more the better, and they'll throw it into the bag, and then they'll run to the national sporting federations and say, this is what we've got to do, without any thinking about, okay, what is this specific to the sport, to the event, biological age? When do we use this testing? Do we use it from at age 6 or at age 26? Who knows? So myself and about 4 or 5 other foreign coaches, we stood there and watched this in Beijing, where, I mean, they were doing chin-ups, for example, and they were actually rocking and just, I mean, it was just, I mean, they were counting, some of the swimmers were doing, like, I think the guy who had the best, I think did 26 or 28. In my book, I wouldn't have counted past 4, because the rest, they were just cheap chins. I mean, he was
style.
He was just doing a pendulum,
Yeah.
and it was just ridiculous. I'm standing, and the fact that he had his chin up. I mean, he was sort of up in that position at the end, and the guys just standing there counting 22, 21, 22, 23, 24, and then there was people who came in and did very strict ones and did 8, 10, 12, and of course they were told, well, that's crap.
The thing is the tests themselves, I mean, I'm not a big test guy, but they might show some interesting things if they're done properly, and you can look across the board, and then you can kind of say, oh, that's interesting. Like the rowers are all pretty good at this, but they're very different than the sprinters here, but there's some similarities with table tennis. Now that's cool sometimes, but not to do all the time. But when you make decisions based on it, and if you're good at your own sport or not, based on some arbitrary test, which has definitely no correlation to what's going on, that's when it's a huge issue. But I mean, you see, I mean, in Switzerland now, that's only just really starting. But I think that it's the same everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets to the point where it gets pretty ridiculous when people are omitted from the national championships because of the fact that they hadn't scored enough points on their physical tests. So in other words, there were athletes in China who were ranked there were athletes who were actually ranked in the top 3, 4 who didn't qualify for the nationals because they couldn't pass the fitness test. I mean, you just turn around and think about that. Let's say you're jumping 8.25 in the long jump. That's enough to get you possibly a medal at any major global championships. Maybe on the other, but definitely you'd make the final. You'd make the top 6, 8. So is that a result which is would be deemed as being of a high level of physical ability? Of course, because the number one test for a long jumper is, well, damn, it's not pole vaulting, it's long jumping. So if you jump 8.28, that's the ultimate test. And if you jump 8.18 the year before, now you did 8.28, well, hell, your training's going the right direction. We're jumping further in the long jump. That's what it's all about. But they were actually omitting athletes because they hadn't passed the physical tests. So there were athletes who were being left out in different sports, swimming. They had actually two of the best breaststrokers in China. Couldn't swim the national championships because they had failed fitness tests.
So what is their hope for the fitness test? Is it a predictor of performance or a predictor of injury? What are they telling you? Or you just have to pass this test for whatever reason, because Olympians pass this test?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You're supposed to pass this test, and if you don't, well, that's tough bickies. So it makes no sense.
Rolf, I think we should get into this one because so many people get wowed about working for one of the big countries in the Olympic organizations. And as a coach, most of the time, coaches are also people that they haven't succeeded in sport themselves. So usually they like to still get involved in sport. I mean, it's not always the case, but it's definitely, there's some of them that do that. And everybody kind of wants to do well at their job. And one of the ways you can see that is with some kind of success, right? Now, if you're a coach, you want to work with the best athletes possible. If you want to work with athletes and Olympians and stuff like that, that's definitely something very interesting to be involved with and a huge journey that you get to go on, right? Now, some of the smartest minds in our field are definitely involved in the Olympic societies with different countries. However, it's not always an easy thing. And whilst definitely the intentions are everybody wants that team to win, and I'm sure that also means the heads of the Olympic organizations, they want to get as many medals as possible, and it goes all the way down to the athletes themselves. However, there's a lot of bullshit that goes on too, and politics and other issues and idiots and all the other, everything else in between. Now, what is important for people to start understanding, especially young coaches that get wowed by things like, and it's not just about China, it could be about any of the other Olympic organizations. When they see the big salary and the chance to work with, in a foreign country where you get to move out, because I know that there's also agents that work in this, right? They sort of cherry pick and try and grab young coaches to move out to a different country. What are some of the things that people should start looking at? Because you've been shafted multiple times. I mean, we don't have to go into the last one if you don't want. If you do, feel free. But what's some of the things that young coaches should look out for, Rolf? Because, this has been one too many times, in my opinion, for you. And now you've had, let's say, you've been bruised everywhere and in every kind of way. What should people be looking out for?
Well, I mean, the thing that attracts coaches, of course, to China, amongst other places, is without a doubt salaries. For me, it was not so much the first job I did in 2016 when I started working full-time in China was the chance to actually work with Randy, who I think is probably one of the top 3-4 track and field coaches over the last 30 years. I mean, the guy has a brilliance where, I mean, you have a couple of these guys. You have your Dan Pfaffs, you have your Randy Huntingtons, and that echelon where they are. I myself think myself as a complete bloody amateur. Every time I speak to Dan and Randy, I just try to keep my mouth shut and just grow an extra set of ears, because they've just got a level of knowledge, and the fact that knowledge. I mean, I'm getting up in the years, and of course I've been around the block a few times, but when you've produced athletes at that caliber for so long, and you just keep doing it, not only in the US, you go to South Korea, you go to China, you go, no matter where, for example, Randy's gone, he's produced people that have jumped incredible distances or run extremely fast. So you've got to sort of, listen to people who can do that, because if you're doing that, if you do it once, that's nice. Twice, okay. If you do it, 2 or 3 times, then it's not a fluke. Because to be quite honest, I mean, if you're in the right place at the right time, and that's unfortunately also how a lot of national coaches, amongst other places in where I am now and where I come from in Australia, there are national coaches who have held positions not because of the fact that they've actually got a track record, but they have got one athlete that honestly our grandmothers could have coached to the same results. They were just incredible athletes, and all of a sudden that person is then the national coach. And then it becomes sort of like it's a catch-up game because they aren't actually at that level themselves. So they're sort of, you know, they're shooting from the hip, and they're having to sort of backtrack, and they're always sort of the thing that you get with that type of coach is, with that type of inexperience, is that they won't step out of their comfort zone. They stay with very, very easy questions. In that, you know, they won't get into an argument or into a deep discussion about, you know, complex things about the training process because they simply don't know them. But of course, to a sports administrator who's got absolutely zilch background in this, means that these types of coaches can hold very, very high positions for a long period of time. Now, unless they're forced to actually, you know, educate themselves and keep moving, you know, up the ladder, they'll stagnate, and many of them do. Which means that you've got other coaches around the country that are very, very bright, have got a lot of ideas, who are doing a lot of things right, but they are virtually getting shot in the pants every week because there are people sitting above who are clueless. And the problem is then if you've got a national coach who's being put there by a sports administrator, well, there are two people then who sort of hold all the firepower, as to speak, and they're protecting each other. So these two guys, they could sit there for 5-10 years and nothing's going to happen. So what happens with that high performance program in that country and that area is nothing. You just get a lot of, you know, animosity, a lot of people who think, you know, this is a shit organization, and it becomes virtually a brawl. And what happens is, for example, in China, is that these guys on the outer, they will never say anything because they can't, because you cannot kick somebody who's higher than yourself. You get kicked from above and down or sideways, but never that way.
Rolf, this ain't exclusive to you. This ain't exclusive to Olympic committees. This is a tale as old as time, man. Like it doesn't matter what industry you're in. This is the same shit that goes on. I mean, hell, this goes on in college football. I mean, you got athletic directors hiring people. You have head coaches hiring people. Brooker and I have gone on fucking rants about this plenty of times.
Yeah, no, I know. But what is the problem if I bounce back to what Brooker was asking about, you know, sort of, what about China? The problem in China is that you sort of go there with all the best intentions, and, you know, you've got the best equipment, you've got a lot of good athletes, and, you know, you go for it. And a lot of these coaches, I mean, some of us are married, we have children, or, you know, some of the younger guys have got children who are, you know, in the 5 to 10 year bracket, and they're not there. They're living in Europe, or they're living in Australia, or they're living in the United States. So you're away from your family for, you know.
You're not allowed to bring your family with you.
Well, you can, but not. No, in some cases, it's just not possible. I mean, for example, where I was staying, and Randy and I were staying, I mean, there are no family apartments. I mean, that environment for a family would be, you know, I'll put it this way: my wife would probably shoot me after 2 weeks. So, and she was with me in 2016 in Dalian, and the area in Dalian is fine because it's on the coast. But she spent 2 weeks there with me, and she just said straight, you know, after 2 weeks, you know, good luck with that. But I'm not staying here. And there's a lot of other guys that I've met, throughout the years in China that have been in the same situation. There are other guys who have brought their families, who have got very young families. That you can do, because the kids aren't at that age where, they're the environment is going to make such a big difference on them, as long as mum's there with them and so forth, and it can work. But if you've got children that's sort of at school age and that sort of thing, it's a very, very different environment in many situations. But in some situations, it's they do look after them without a doubt. They do, and they provide resources and so forth. But it's still it's not like living at home in Poland or Serbia or wherever you come from. It is a completely different ball game.
One of the things that I've heard from you a lot, and also from other guys that I know that have gone out there, is there seems to be this illusion of security, right? Like also with what happened to you recently, you're involved. It seems like you're part of the whole training process. You might have moved your whole family out there or not, and you might have even signed a contract or not. I mean, I'm not sure if everything's all done via contract. But the unfortunate thing, and I mean, this is also the same with kind of any job, I guess. I mean, you are protected by certain rights in certain countries, depending on certain things. But it's always hard when, say like how much time and effort and energy it takes to build up a training process over 2 years, 4 years, to then suddenly start working with an athlete. And I mean, you're not getting results really quick. Usually not anyway. You're not seeing the true potential of anyone in any kind of short-term period. To then be quickly pulled, and you might not even get paid out, or maybe you do, but that whole trauma of going through that, and also cannot be good for the athlete themselves, who needs someone to really be with them to build up this coach-athlete relationship, and to be able to focus on the next goal, which is, these athletes are devoting their entire life to trying to succeed in a championship. And say in China, if they do win an Olympic gold medal, their life does change, right? It's quite clear. So that seems to be, for me, from the outside, the biggest disadvantage. You have no sense of security whatsoever. If you say something or do something, or if you don't get a result in a certain competition, you just get kicked to the curb and told, see you later.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things. First of all, in China, to be quite honest, going to the Olympics and winning an Olympic gold medal is big, but it's not as big as if you win the national games. Their national games is by leaps and bounds much, much, much more important than winning a gold medal at the Olympics.
So why is that? What does the national games look like? Is this like 100,000 people in a stadium, televised everywhere, or what is it?
Yeah, it's televised by 4 or 5 of the CCTV China channels. The crowds are, some sports very big, some other sports it's crap, but it's televised. But it's a political competition. It's like the Russians had their Spartakiad, which was the precursor to the pre-Olympics, which they had, for example, before the Moscow Olympics. And it's a manifestation for the political party to show everybody in China, look how great we are. So if you win the national games, you are set for life. You've got a job. You've got you'll get huge bonuses, massive bonuses.
So the people that they send to the Olympics, those are the ones that win the national games, though, no?
Yeah, some of them have. For example, Su Bing-chung, for example, who's one of the world's best sprinters, he's never won the national games.
Why not? How is that possible? There's someone faster than him in the country that doesn't go to the Olympics?
Well, before he was coached by, before Randy took him over, my lovely wife has just come with a fresh made cinnamon bun, homemade, and a cup of coffee. How's that?
Happy Fika, mate. There you go.
Yeah, exactly, Fika. Yeah, so before Sue was being coached by Randy, I mean, he had run, I think he'd run one sub 10, but he was very inconsistent. You know, he could run 9:98, he could run 10:28, and it just seemed like the one or two national games that he was participating in when he was running fast, he just couldn't put it together on the day, and had never won. So because of now the COVID and everything, the national games are in September. So after the Olympics, the athletes will come home, and this is going to be very interesting. I'm going to be very, very interested to see what is going to transpire with results. Are these guys peaking for the Olympics, or are they peaking for a month later? At their sort of mid, I think it's about the 15th of September, the national games are going. So are they going to be firing at the Olympics and at the national games, or are they going to be firing? Are they using the Olympics as a let's say a pre-meet for their national games?
So from like let's say from the Chinese government, the Olympics are obviously more important to get the results at, right? But I guess from the athlete's perspective, they've got more of a chance to this bigger for the national games. So that's what you're saying there, right? So you think the athletes, there's a chance they might be keeping some in the tank so they can get a better result at the national games, because their life will change more likely than at the Olympics, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's say if you were to get 6th or 7th or 8th, you make the final and you run, let's say in the top 8 at the Olympics, and you win the national games, which would the athlete prefer? To get 5th at the Olympics or win the national games? I mean, you and I'd say 5th at the Olympics any day, 10 days out of the week. Chinese are going to say national games, because all the funding for all the provinces is based upon what they do at the national games. So
see, that's so silly to me, because if you're in the Olympics, you're the nation's best. So like, isn't it a given that you are the best sprinter in the nation or the best jumper in the nation if you're placing 5th in the Olympics, considering no one else? Like it's like an ipso facto.
It could be, and it could be that the guy who wins the national games actually does a performance, which is actually, it could be another guy. Let's say it's in the long jump. Let's say you send 2 guys to the long jump Olympics, and one jumps 8:20, the other one jumps 8:30. Well, the guy who jumped 8:30 Olympic, he gets 4th. Yeah, great. But then the guy who jumped 8:20, he might have been 8th or 9th. But he comes home in September and jumps 8:28, and the other guy jumps 8:27. The guy who jumps 8:28 and he wins the national games, he gets an apartment, he gets a brand new motor car and $100,000 in his bank account, plus a job for his wife. You do the maths. What did the guy who got 5th at the Olympics get?
Yeah. Nothing.
No.
So you were mentioning something, if you have one guy that's fast, all right, that could be coincidence. 2, 3 guys, it's not as much coincidence anymore. You commented on one of my videos that I had of the McCourty twins. That they were running, you mentioned they were running 10.58 meters per second. Now I'm sure you come across guys that run that every single day. That's like a pretty intermediate fucking sprinter for you. I might have 1 or 2 guys run that fast, but that's the fastest time I've ever recorded for a flying sprint, like a 0.58, a 0.58, holy fuck. A 0.85 10-yard sprint. I haven't seen many people fucking faster than that, regardless of what it was that I do with guys. And prior to that, I think they've run, the fastest I've had them run was like a 0.88. So, I mean, even 13 years in the NFL, 12, 13 years in the NFL, they're still maintaining and maybe getting faster, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe I just had him on a slower day before. For guys like that, and you classify that as like a novice or intermediate sprinter?
Oh, I mean, that's intermediate.
Intermediate. So, but that's a low end of intermediate, right? Yeah. So with guys like that, what are you doing? And I've had discussions with coaches before that have posted a handful of guys, like probably 10, 15 athletes, football players, running anywhere between 0.89 to 0.92, 0.93 10-yard fly-ins with, I don't even know how long their buildups were, but I mean, to have that many athletes doing it that fast, I haven't seen that many people able to run it that fast. I mean, I have linebackers running, 1 second flats and 0.99s.
They weigh what, 220, 235?
Yes. So I don't know. And I'm so simplistic in my approach where we do fly-in tens to improve the fly-in tens, to improve the top speed. What else would you be adding to these exercises to complement them to improve the overall top speed? Especially if you have someone already running fast. What are you doing for them to make them run faster? Is it rest? Is it more running fast? These are things that, I mean, maybe I'm just the more I'm starting to learn, the more simplistic my approach is, and the less that I'm actually knowing. Like, all right, well, just let these motherfuckers be themselves. Like, am I making them faster, or am I just letting them do the event so they stay out of their fucking way, so they can realize their full potential?
There's a bit of, I think there's a bit of truth in everything of that. I think the thing that I've learned, and I was fortunate enough to meet Charlie Francis very, very, very early on. He was, after the 88 Olympics, I've probably told you this story before, he was unable to get a job because of what happened with Ben. And he, all of a sudden, he was touring sort of the world and was turning up at gyms because he was persona non grata in any training facility as far as track and field because of what happened to Ben. He had the bubonic plague, so he was bumming around getting doing seminars about strength and conditioning for speed and power at gyms. And as I said, I was training at a fitness gym in the Toowong village. It's called. It's a shopping centre in Toowong in Brisbane, in the western suburbs where I live, where I grew up. And I walked in there one day, and I've been training there for a while, and walked past, saw a guy sitting on the left hand in one of the club chairs, and I sort of kept going, walked into the change room, and I'm thinking, that was Charlie Francis. And I'm going, no, what the fuck would Charlie Francis be sitting at the Toowong Village bloody gym? No. So I changed, went into the gym, and had done a set of whatever I was doing there, first exercise. I just couldn't get it out of my head. No, that was fucking Charlie Francis. So I walk out of the gym again and thought, well, maybe the guy's still out there. So about 20 minutes later, I walk out and he's sitting there, and I just turned to him and I looked at him. I said, "You're Charlie Francis," and he sort of looked at himself and sort of looked at his hands and turned them inside out and said, "Yeah, I think so." And for the next 2 weeks, I just picked this guy's brain. He was probably ready to shoot me. I just followed him every day. I was just up there. I was listening to him. I don't know how much money I paid to go to listen to his seminars. He was doing a whole bunch of gyms around Brisbane. And I would go to each one and pay 30, 40, 50 bucks, whatever it is, just to get in there and virtually hear him say the same thing he'd said in the gym the night before, the 2 nights before. But, I was busy trying to write down everything and just trying to soak in all this knowledge that this man had. And I think that's where it started for me, was with his approach to strength and conditioning. What he calls his vertical implementation. integration, and that sort of had already set up with me because I was a decathlete, a broken down one, and I'd sort of finished my career after a bad injury, and what I'd always seen was that I could get strong, but I would always lose. Just as soon as I got off the weights and started doing power, I would just lose so much. It was ridiculous. And I really couldn't understand why until I met Charlie, because then he introduced me to vertical integration. And then I understood that everything that you do, you need to do on a year basis. You can't do a block system where you do general preparation and then you do specific preparation, and then 6 weeks before you're going to compete, that's when you start doing power and speed. It don't work that way, because he made it very simple. He said to me, okay, so what do you do for this? And I said, I do, we do rep this and that at 85 to 90%. He said, why? Speed endurance. But that's not his. And he goes, okay, good. Do you compete at 85, 90%? And I said, no. He said, then why are you running speed endurance at 85, 90%? And I just sat there and I'm thinking, what the hell am I, I'm going to be, I'm going to say something totally stupid. This guy's going to hit me in the head, and I had nothing to come with. And I said, well, that's what everybody does, and he goes, yeah, but see, I don't do that. I do tempo. I do extensive tempo. And when we run, sprinting for me, it starts at about 94, 95% to 102. That's it. That's sprinting. Everything. So Charlie does nothing virtually between 70% and 90%. Nothing. Because it has no implication on running fast. It's all about endurance. But then again, if you're involved in a sport where maximum speed is not the number one thing, you might be better suited to have a lower top end speed but more speed endurance, and then you can use more towards what would you say a normal approach to the problem. The other approach was that most of us in Australia, we were using the long to short approach, which of course Charlie does, and Randy Rayner does the opposite. It's short to long. So in other words, you learn how to run fast as shit over 10 meters, then 12, then 14, then 16, then 18, and then you build it up that way.
When you did the long to short approach, what was your starting distance?
If you're running for 100 meters, like I was a decathlete, but if you were looking at sprinters and the guys I was working with in Queensland at that stage were running probably about 10:30, 10:40 for 100. I mean, they traditionally they'd come out and roll off a whole bunch of 120s, 150s, 170s, 180s, and then they do flying 30s and flying 60s as they were approaching the season. No, that was pretty common.
A flying 60?
Yeah. Oh shit, yeah. Back in the day.
What was the build up for that?
20 yards, 20 meters, 25 meters. So you'd virtually run 100. So you'd have a 20, 30 meter acceleration, then you'd do a fly 60 and you'd shut down.
So you guys would start off like running 200s as fast as you could, 300s as fast as you could, and then work your way down from there?
Yeah, the coach that I had as a youngster, I can remember I would run one of the sessions that I've got books here from going back in the mid 70s when I was 17 years old, and I have sessions when I'm 18 years old where I'm running 16 times 200 meters with a jog back recovery. So you'd finish at the finishing line and you'd diagonally jog back to the 200. I'd run 16 200s, and I think I was averaging sort of 25.5 to 26 seconds. So I could reel off crazy amounts of distance, but But I had no speed. I just had endurance.
Were your starts dog shit?
My 100 was dog shit. My 400 was dog shit. But I didn't know any better. And, you know, when I sort of went to Europe, I realized that, you know, and I've never thought myself, because I was not fast at school. But then again, the crazy thing is, even from a young age, even though I was a little whippersnipper, I could never beat anybody at 100 meters to save my life, really. You know, I probably was running about 12.2 when I was about 16 or 17. That was about it. But from my standing start, for 20 or 30 meters, I could hold guys who were running well over a second faster than me in 100. So I could accelerate. And at those days, we were doing no bounding. I mean, nobody was doing any bounding. Or if we were doing bounding, it was just on the grass. Just the coach would say, okay, now finish off with 4 times 30 meters of speed bound. And you just sort of bound, you know, we were on grass, and you just go, bang, and you'd go home. That's it. And then you know, when I got to Europe, the Europeans were doing massive amounts of standing triple jumps, like standing 3 steps, 5 steps, standing 10 steps, looking at how far you got in 10 steps and the time that you got the 10 steps, and they'd have an index on that. And all of a sudden, you know, these guys were saying, what have you run for 100? Oh, I've run 11.5. And I'm doing sort of like a 3 meter 18 standing long jump. I'm doing a 950 standing triple jump. You know, I'm doing 32 meters in a standing 10 step at, you know, whatever time. And the index is saying that I should be running 1050 for 100. So I had all these jumping parameters that told me, and my vertical jump, everything was pointing towards I should be running 1050, and I was running 1150. And then when they asked me sort of, okay, so what have you done for training? And I just sort of, oh, this is what I did in 1976, 77, 78. And it's like 1,500 meter training with a little bit of speed work. And that is still virtually, to be honest, a lot of the places I've been in China, that's what they're still doing today. There is no short to long approach. It's long to even more. Because their way of working is volume, just bring it, keep bringing it up, have a bit of a rest, and then about 3 months out from the major championship, you go all in, all the chips are on the table, you're all in, and then you just push the button as far as you can, and then about a week, 10 days out, you drop everything. And the ones that survive that, they usually do something, and you can just guess how many people out of a group of 20 or 30 athletes survive that to start off with.
So now you do the short to long approach. How long do you spend at what distances? So with my guys, if I have time, I will literally spend 4 weeks going all the way up to 60 yards. Now, you know, because the 60 yards is pretty much where everyone caps out at top speed. Especially my team sport athletes, they probably cap out at like 50 yards. That's and they'll reach top speed maybe 30 yards, 30, 35, maybe 40 yards. They're able to actually hit their top speed because their entire sport is played in acceleration. So I'll spend 4 weeks. If I have the luxury of time, I will spend 4 weeks in each block. What will you do? How will you progress it? What different starts will you do? How will you get these guys stronger and faster?
Well, I mean, at the moment, if I look at what I've got a young Australian sprinter who was thrown off the national team because of injury, and we've worked now since August last year, and we were trying to get him back on the 4x100 team to go to Tokyo, but unfortunately the Australians just didn't give the 4x100 relay a fair crack of the whip, and they didn't go to Poland to qualify, so they had to run very, very fast at home. And then they only sent them away for a camp, which Jacob was allowed to go to the camp. But the problem was that the guy who's running the show was not looking at, you know, the two main factors that you look at when you run. For example, when you run a relay. There are two criteria. Number one is baton exchange. You've got to be able to get into the zone and out of the zone fast. So there are certain distances that you time that everybody does around the world, and if you're running sort of fast, then the times are sort of in the 2.7 second bracket and so forth. And Jacob managed to run the second fastest relay exchange ever in Australia. And then, unfortunately, what they do is they only look at the 100-meter time. Now, certain athletes, now when you've got to remember, in 100 meters, you've got to start from starting blocks. In a relay, you're starting from running, you're actually getting a running start, and then you get the baton. So what quality is the quality that is most important running relays? Well, in the guys who are running second, third, and fourth, it's top end speed. It is all about top end speed because you're getting a running start. So what they should have done is they should have done some timing over, some distance where they actually grab the baton and they come tearing in through the baton change, and then, you might time them over 50, 60 meters. And you look at those times. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So a long story short, with Jacob, we've spent this whole year getting his mechanics right. And he's only run 10:40 this year. Doesn't sound like much, but the thing is, we've timed him in certain races, and in training, he's been running it at about 11.38 meters per second. So at 11.38 is about what a guy who should be running 10:18, round about there. So he's running, or actually even a little bit faster. So he's running fast enough top end speed to be able to match most guys who are, running somewhere in the sort of 10:10 to 10:15, 10:18 bracket. So my approach this year has been, with regards to short to long, is to get him running mechanically sound, because what he's lacking at the moment is power. He's not strong enough. He's not powerful enough to get out of the box and accelerate as he does. So what he's losing to the best guys in Australia at the moment, he's probably ranked 4 or 5 in Australia at the moment. The guys who are running faster than him, they're picking him off in the first 40, 50 meters. But virtually from 60 meters and inwards, when everybody's reaching top speed, he's cutting them down. He's reeling them in, but he just hasn't got enough time or enough distance to reel them in. So
when you started working with him and you're looking at his mechanics, are you moving him over 10 meters or 20 meters to start with, and then are you still keeping your training program every 2 weeks? You're accumulating and then intensifying. Is that how you're still working?
Yep. No, we looked at certain things that we had to do with drills, the way that what cues was he used to. I mean, there are certain things that once you get into high max velocity, you're not trying to create force horizontally. It's all about vertical. You've got to be working vertical. What cues are working for him? You can have a cue which works for a bunch of athletes. It works perfectly, and then you get another athlete and you tell them heel down in the maximum velocity phase, and they just totally they lose everything. It just doesn't compute for them. And that sort of going back a whole bunch of steps before that. This is where we see, Randy and I have had this discussion, this is where you see, and also, what's his name? The guy I've been working with a little bit here, might have come to me. He's working in the US. He's a professor. He's very, very big into long-term athletic development. Professor Rick Howard. And if you look at long-term athletic development, I've got a sort of a thing that I've been looking at and have sort of worked out for a bunch of years, that there are virtually 9 different type of movement patterns that, you know, we're talking about jumping, landing, you know, pulling, pushing, lunge, squatting, and, hip hinge. Those movements are the foundations of everything else. All other movements virtually come from these 9 basic movement patterns. Now, if you've got an athlete, and I've termed this with discussing with Rick, a couple of projects that we've been doing. When people write early specialization, I call it early underdevelopment, because that's what happens. Because if you start specializing too early, you underdevelop these 9 qualities. You're gonna find that a bunch of these athletes will only get good at 2 or 3 of these 9 qualities. What does that mean? Does that mean that they can't reach big results? Both yes and no. But what Randy and I and Rick are absolutely dead set certain of is it means that you've got a toolbox of movement patterns that is severely limited, which means that sometime or another in your career, when you are in need of finding another level, for example, if you all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over a period of years get much faster in the approach in your long jump, then that's going to start, you know, having implications as far as your movement patterns and how you're going to handle that. Now, if you don't have certain other qualities built in around that, you can't utilize that new speed. It just becomes, it's like you're treading water. You just don't feel the board. You just don't feel the attack, the last few strides. And that is usually caused by the fact that there are other movement patterns that are associated with doing that. For example, let's say a short 20 centimeter step up with very heavy weights. It's a very short movement, but it's a movement which is great for building very, very good feeling and power in hip extension over a very, very limited range of motion. But if you look at the support phase, for example, when somebody is running at top speed, or if they're long jumping, then the amount of leg bend that you have, or knee bend and hip flexion that you have is very, very little. So a 20 centimeter step up is a very, very good exercise in my view of getting athletes to be able to exert specific strength and power in a very, very short period of time.
With that specific exercise, now I call those a single leg stomp step ups. I mean, for guys, you've seen me post that. I got that idea from you. Would you change it based on the athlete's height, or do you just keep it 20? I mean, ideally, I'm sure that's what you would do, but you just keep it 20 centimeters and that's that.
Yeah, if you've got, I don't have that. I haven't had that problem yet. But if I had somebody like, if I had a fast 1040 Usain Bolt type of guy who's 6'4", and then I've got another guy who's like Subing Chun who's 5'7", definitely you'd probably change that a little bit because of the fact that it's just biomechanically it's going to be different. But there's not a great deal of difference. I mean, for the really short guy, definitely, you might want to go down maybe to 15 centimeters. But it's the execution in itself, and as I've said before, for me, I'm doing a bit of work now with a couple of guys that have contacted me from China that I'm doing a bit of consulting with, as far as they're trying to understand my way of thinking, or why I think the way I do. And I said one of the things they should do is to get themselves if they're using a VMAX Pro or whatever system they're using where they can capture data, go into the gym that you've got in China and then set up a weight that's exactly the same. If it's 40 kilos or 50 kilos, whatever, every machine you've got in there, and capture data so that you understand exactly what happens on every single machine or piece of equipment you've got in there, so that so you can see a progression, so that you can see that certain machines they're useless. They just can't do what we want to do, but you can use them in let's say some circuit work in a general preparation before you actually start. I have I have a general preparation A, and then I have a general preparation B. Now, preparation B is more push-pull, and I use a lot of, I love using Kaiser at that stage. It's great for doing that because we can increase speed. It's very safe, and it's a good circuit, and it gets them set up and ready to to get stuck into the next phase. In my way of working is maximum strength phase. So maximum strength phase and acceleration phase, they go hand in hand. So I want to couple as much as I can of that maximum acceleration or maximum strength into maximum acceleration. So that is where the vertical integration comes in.
So this is where I have an issue. Is I take forever to get to maximum strength, right? My work capacity, maximum strength in my opinion is it's important, but it's almost like the least important thing that I do with my guys, because with again, now these aren't sprinters, these are multidisciplinary athletes, but I look at the maximum strength phase as an expression of the manifestation of work, right? Like it's essentially, this is the culmination for us to realize how strong we are currently from all the work capacity that we spent, the 16 weeks actually generating and developing and doing all this. And the max strength is like it's the ability for your brain to process how to properly contract the musculature associated with these movement patterns that we've been developing for this whole time. So we'll do a bunch of work capacity. We'll do high reps. We'll do aerobic. We'll do eccentric. We'll do isometric. And then the last thing that we do is the maximum strength or the power. Essentially, we'll probably do maximum strength after we do more speed squats, speed oriented stuff, just because I'm more interested in that. Now, in a short to long approach, saving the maximum strength for last, that doesn't go hand in hand with acceleration either. And that's another issue that I have. Like, well, I want to get these guys as strong as I possibly can early on. And if time's of the essence, we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about HIT training and how HIT training in a 6-week span is optimal, right? When you don't have a lot of time, you do fucking HIT training. But when you do have a lot of time, then what do you do? So if I train my guys to failure during the acceleration phase, that's going to yield the best results, but it's just not sustainable. So I don't know what the fuck to do anymore.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the same problems that we have and I've had throughout the years, and that's why I've taken this approach that I work with accumulation intensification, and also the short to long approach, vertical integration, is that, and also if you look at the race, where am I going to express? If you look at the 100 meters, where am I going to express endurance at the end of the race? So can I start doing endurance work before I've done acceleration? No, because it's just not going to tie in together, because I'm going to have to accelerate, and then I've got to get out of acceleration and find another body position where I can express maximum velocity and stay nice and loose so that I'm not de-accelerating too much. So I need to have a transition, and some athletes have huge problems going from 60 meters to 100 meters. They just cannot transition. They're still just going like a sewing machine. And once you're out at 60 meters and the senior sewing machine is going at 100 miles an hour, that's, and if you've got a guy next to you with, maybe not the size of Bolt, but somebody who can open up his stride or her stride, they're gonna cut you down. That's, because it's just, everybody loses speed. It's just that who does it better, that is going to usually win. But you've got to be able to accelerate. A lot of people, you hear from time to time, these yahoos that are, running all these speed places around the world. Well, Usain Bolt was never a fast guy in the start. That's why he didn't run 60 meters. That's bullshit. I mean, if you look at when he said when he's run his 100-meter times, have a look what the statistics, the timing equipment tells you that he's run his first 60 meters in. I mean, he's running sub 6:40, which means he's virtually setting the world record in the 60 meters. But because he doesn't run the 60 meters indoors and post these 6:31, 6:32 times and everything, I mean, there are two reasons. One is he's Jamaican. There aren't too many indoor facilities in Jamaica for a reason. Number two, if you look at indoors, what happens at the end of 60 meters? Well, virtually at the end of 60 meters, directly, you've got an embankment which you've got to climb up, because that's the curve of the indoor track. So you've got an incline going up. Now, if you're a big, tall guy like he is, and got a massive, big stride, coming in at 12 meters per second, which he'd be virtually hitting at the end of 60, and then having to all of a sudden be running up a hill where you are going to have to take 2 or 3 strides up a fairly steep embankment on those curves, that is, you don't want to be giving a guy who's 6'5", 6'6", that sort of a problem, because if something's going to, crap your knees up and your hip up and your lower back, it's that. And it also, I think, probably in his case, what's he got to win by showing everybody he can run 60 meters, even if he did run 60 meters? It's sort of like, yeah, great, it's nice running 60 meters, but it's much cooler being home in Jamaica in the warm weather instead of, somewhere in bloody cold northern hemisphere running 60 meters. You can be in Kingston, Jamaica in the sunshine doing your track workouts and then running everybody off the planet when the outdoor season comes. So, there are multiple reasons why he doesn't. But then again, if you look at certain body types, it's not the best place to be running indoor 200, for example. You get caught in the first lane, you're not going to run fast to start off with. Second of all, the amount of pressure on that inside left leg and foot is ridiculous. And that is, for example, Jacob, that's where he hurt himself, was running 200s. Just having bad mechanics and running 200s on the curve and being fast enough to exert that much pressure. So he got, had some ligament problems in his left knee, which, put his sidelined him. So, and so again, I mean, if you're looking at the same approach that you were describing, I've done with pro hockey players, where I look at, because they're not overly interested in maximum speed on the ice as far as skating speed. What we're interested in, on the other hand, are two things. Number one is to be able to out-accelerate the opposition. Once the puck is free, or I've got the puck, I want to be able to take 3 or 4 skates, and I want to break free. So I need acceleration, and then I need work capacity, because you've got to play for 3 by 20 minutes. So if you can outwork the opposition, you can actually go a long, long way in pro hockey if your team can outwork the opposition. You don't have a better skill set or whatever, but you are just simply outworking them. You're going to grind them down over 3 periods, because you're just able to operate at a higher level. And with that said, why do I then do maximum strength work? Because maximum strength actually aids in endurance. Because if you've got a bigger max strength number, then you can operate at your 85% is going to be higher than if somebody who does a 150 kilo squat or somebody who does a 200 kilo squat. The guy who does a 200 kilo squat, he's going to do more repetitions at 150 because of the fact, or if a guy who does, say, let's say 170 kilos and one does 200, the guy who does 200, he's going to do more repetitions at 150 or 140 kilos, or even at 100 kilos, because of the fact that 100 kilos for one guy is 50%, but in the other case, it's what, about 85%. So the guy who's having to push 100 kilos, it's 50% of his maximum. He's just going to be able to out-rep you. So in other words, his work capacity is higher.
This is James the Thinker Smith's maximal versus operational outputs, eh?
Yeah.
No.
So, but then again, what you've got to do is, and then this is where it sort of gets, some people get lost a little bit. Are we interested in maximum strength? Like, are we after powerlifting maximum strength? For me, that is for me when people say maximum strength. I mean, my sprinters, for example, do we train maximum strength? Oh, hell yeah. Are we after maximum strength? No. It is a byproduct of the fact that we're operating with weights that we can move fast. Because one thing that I learned very quickly, and that's also why I wanted to work with Randy, is because everything that Randy does, everything that Rainer does is coupled to, in the gym, is coupled to velocity. I mean, we don't go down to the gym and, for example, the sprinters that we've had, they weigh just over 70 kilos. They're not big guys, but 70, 73 kilos. And they're moving, like 120, 130 kilos in cleans, which is, getting close to double body weight. They're moving at about 2.5 to 2.7 meters per second. That's fast. So the problem is then when you look at VBT training, which, I don't mind VBT training, but for high performance, we don't do that. I mean,
wait, they're cleaning at 2.5 meters per second, double their body weight?
But I mean, for example, Sue weighs 72, and at about 110 kilos, he is, which is what, 110 is it's about 160% of his body weight. So he's moving that at about 2.5, 2.7 meters per second.
From the ground?
No, that's the first rep you do from the ground, and then, for example, if we're doing a set of 3, the first is from the ground, and then the second and third rep will be from hang, and then we transition into just hang, for example, to make it faster.
So, which speed are you? Which rep are you tracking? Are you tracking? Is it all 3?
Yeah.
So all three of them are going to be 2 meters per second or faster.
Yeah. Oh hell yeah. Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Oh yeah. These guys that are running and jumping these distances, they are extremely powerful. I mean, they can move, and this is where Randy and Rainer have got a whole, and even myself. I mean, I haven't produced sprinters that are running as fast as these guys have done. But I mean, I've gone to the same school. That's why I wanted to work with these guys.
What are you using to track it?
Well, I have 2 systems I use. I either use my Muscle Lab system, or I use VMAX Pro.
Which one do you recommend?
Well, for me, as I've probably said before, and this is where sort of Randy and I set us, and Rainer again, we're a little bit different in this respect, because peak velocity is fine, and that's nice. It tells us a great deal, but there is one more metric or figure that's even more important, and that is what actually transpires the first 150 milliseconds when we start doing something.
Yes, so, you started talking about that last time. Yeah.
And this is what I think one of the reasons why Randy brought me in, because I've been working with Muscle Lab for many, many years. And that's one of the reasons why the 1080 Sprint and the 1080 Quantum exists, because I needed and I wanted to be able to track what actually transpires in the later part of the eccentric phase and back into the concentric phase, because that phase is what Randy calls the DIS, because we both have the opinion until we'll see what happens. There's a few studies going now that I think are going to show that maybe we're right. If we're not, then there is another mechanism at work which does something. But what it looks like is that in the later parts of the eccentric phase, when you're doing a squat, for example, in the last part, just before you stop at whatever range of motion you decide to stop, there is no lengthening of the fibers. It is an isometric position from those last few degrees and back to the positive again. It's all isometric. It's all taken up by soft tissue and fascia, and the whole system works. This is what I believe. The whole system works virtually like a springboard. It does for a diver. It gives the athlete that ability to be able to springboard and get out of that deep position with the biggest amount of acceleration. And the thing is, when we've looked at thousands of athletes, my colleague Kenneth here in Sweden, who was a decathlete coach, who's retired today, but we sort of speak twice a week, and he's still doing a lot of measurements and stuff as a consultant. And what we found is that the athletes that always are the best at producing these massive numbers and results have the biggest capacity when it comes to what Randy calls the DIS, a dynamic isometric strength phase. That's where they shine. They absolutely kill everyone.
What do you mean? Where do you see that? Where do you see that if they've got the biggest capacity for the DIS? Where do you see that?
How fast they accelerate the first 150 milliseconds from stop position, wherever that might be, where they actually stop the eccentric phase and then they restart the concentric phase. So the first 150 milliseconds of the concentric phase, and if you see the guys that have got this massive capacity, their inclination or their incline as far as acceleration is just crazy. It's nearly vertical. It just goes off the chart.
Which system uses which system do you use to measure that then?
That's where Muscle Lab comes in.
Which one though? The dynamic strength, Dynaspeed, the laser speed, the force plate. What are you using for it?
I use the encoder.
The encoder?
I have a force plate, but I use the encoder because the metric that I use is TPV, time to peak velocity.
Yes.
So yes. It tells me, for example, I'll do a rep with somebody and TPV will say 180 or it'll say 0.18, which means I reach peak velocity after 180 milliseconds.
See and this is my problem with VBT is there's a time component that you need for these types of things. So I think it's almost irresponsible to utilize these methods without developing a proper base, right? Like I can get guys strong and fast as fuck in a short amount of time, but it doesn't mean it's sustainable, right? We have to endure an entire season. So for me to do that in a 6-week period of time, get you as strong as I possibly can, get you as fast as I possibly can, get you firing as fast as we possibly can. All right, good. So you're good for a couple of weeks and then you start either getting weaker or you start getting injured, right? Just because you're capable of producing the forces doesn't mean you're capable of sustaining it. And this is where the injuries come in. So I almost never, my first and foremost thing is making sure my guys stay on the fucking field. Whereas you have your guys for 2-3 years, right? So this stuff is applicable. That's why I never dove down this rabbit hole, because in my opinion, first and foremost, play your sport and finish the season before I worry about PRing.
Yeah. I fully agree, and this is one of the things that I battle with when I work with the Italian national football team, is that we saw that there were limitations with the national team as far as capacity of speed and power, and we saw that we needed to increase that. But the problem is that how long are they training at the national team? They would tonight is the final. In a few hours' time, England are playing Italy in the final of the European Cup. So how long have these guys been together? They've probably together about 4 weeks, and now they've been together. So they've probably been together 6 weeks, maybe 7, 8 weeks, because of the fact that with COVID now they've been changing. They've been playing in different countries. So the preliminary rounds were in, you're virtually playing each one in a different country, and now the semi-finals and the final are being played at Wembley. So they've been in Wembley now for about a week since they played the semi-finals. So you've got a team together for like 4-6 weeks, like you're describing. And what can I do in 6 weeks? What I can do is I can tone them up. I can get them firing with whatever was there when they came. I can bring up, but I can't bring a new level. Or if I can, I'm going to be really, really stretching it, because it takes about, well, as you know, I work 2 weeks, then I have a recovery week, then I have a 2-week block again of intensification, and then a recovery week. So for me, a cycle is 6 weeks. So it takes at least one full cycle to get to the next physiological level. If I want to increase things, if it's power capacity, if it's maximum strength or acceleration capacity, that takes me about 6 weeks to get to a new level. So if you've got these guys for 6 weeks before the preseason, what can you do? I mean, you're only whatever they come back from, doing whatever they've been doing in Hawaii or whatever they've been playing around with their millions of dollars that allows them to do that. If they come in absolutely and they've only been drinking beer and going to, all night parties for the last 4 weeks and then rock up to pre-season, well, what are you going to do in 6 weeks? Because it's going to take you, in my way of looking at it, it's going to take you at least 2 to 3 weeks of Kaiser circuits to get his body back functioning to where I can actually start loading him. And then I need to have a week off, and then I've got 1 week to intensify.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I deal with all my guys, where I only get people for 6 weeks. You know what I mean? Like if I'm lucky, I'll get you for 10 weeks. I'll get you for 12 weeks, and it won't be undisrupted. It's never undisrupted. It sucks because everyone and their mother wants to start doing all these sexy exercises and get faster and do this, but like we don't have that luxury to really develop speed. All I need to do is make sure that you can withstand, first off, that you're healthy. Like everyone comes in fucking injured, especially if you're a team sport athlete. So we got to get you, we have to get you healthy before we start improving performance. I mean, so I don't even know. In my opinion, I don't know how to get people fucking faster anymore. Or if I ever did, because all I know is how to keep you healthy and allow you to express yourself at your most optimal state. Whereas we're not doing anything to improve velocity per se, other than sprinting. And then like when we move the weights, we want to move the weights with fast intention, but I ain't tracking shit because that's not my main focus at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think, for me, what I thought with regards to the soccer players was to get them to accelerate a little bit better, because we know that about 85% of the scoring that's done in soccer is done at speeds that are 85% of maximum. I mean, you can, because of GPS tracking, there's lots of metrics that they've been able to download. So we know that a lot of the scoring is done that has been that the preceding movements, or let's say of drive on the field, was done at speeds of 85% or greater of their max velocity, what they had. So there was something happened on the field where there was a break, and all of a sudden, bang, everybody's rushing off, and there's a couple of passes, things are happening, bang, there's a goal. So 85% of the time that they score, what happened in the preceding 2 or 3 movements before that was done at speeds of 85% and above. So that tells me that you can't be fiddling around with shit that is 70, 75 and 80%, because if 85% of all the scoring is done with things that are proceeding, happening of speeds of 85% and above, then you're missing out on a great deal of opportunity of exploiting their acceleration ability. So I would, for soccer, I think that they should work more initially on acceleration, and then they should do general conditioning, which I do which means extensive tempo, which doesn't interfere with the central nervous system, because the speed is too low, but they get this aerobic basic base, and then your pre-season games, and the fact that if you're looking at soccer today, I mean, my son plays in England, he's playing 50 games a year. I mean, shit. I mean, that means, if you're a midfielder, you're running 8-10 kilometers times 50. I mean, you're doing a hell of a lot of running. So, I mean, do you need to come at the start of the season with peak aerobic fitness? Because as you said, we can get somebody really, really fit doing HIT in 4 to 6 weeks. In fact, I challenged a hockey team here, and I said, look, you guys are wasting your time. They were running up these hills and they were doing all sorts of shit. And, these guys were just, I mean, they were ragged. So they couldn't do anything explosive. But the coach said, oh, yeah, but they've got great conditioning. I said, yeah, they've got great conditioning at working at 70% of maximum. But that's not what you guys are going to do. Oh, the work capacity. Yeah, but the work capacity is too low. So I said, so here's what we'll do. Let's just have an experiment. So let's do HIT for 6 weeks. I think it was 5 weeks. So we did HIT for 5 weeks. Bang. So I did. They actually sat on cycles. They were on bikes, stationary bikes. So they warmed up for 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, and after 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 20 minutes, they did virtually a full-out sprint for 30 seconds on each one of those 4 minutes. So at 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 11, 14, 17, and 20 minutes, they went full ball for 30 seconds. And then they went down to a steady cadence, which we decided was appropriate. And we did that for 4 or 5 weeks. And then we did some more testing, and we killed it. And they were all sort of sitting there. I said, look, all the slow, long distance shit, that's going to do nothing for you. I mean, it gives you a capillary capacity, but then it's like boring up an engine. You've got lots more, volume, but you need to have something inside the cylinder going bang, because otherwise you're going to get a bloody diesel. It's just going to chug along at about 1,500 RPMs. And if that's what you compete at, great. But if you don't compete at that, then just getting a bigger bore and getting more volume is doing you nothing. You've got to be able to make things happen. And I think that's a lot of the team sports. But again, if you look at these guys, there are a couple of figures in European soccer. Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. If you look at him and look at the transformation body-wise from 2014, 15 until now, the guy, he's shredded. He looks like he's a super athlete. And the reason why he's still doing what he's doing, and he's one of the best players in the world at age 37, is because he doesn't take the approach of coming to pre-season, after having been in Ibiza for 6 weeks or 12 weeks partying with all the women. He actually trains year round. He has a personal trainer. He works specific things all year round. So there is no sort of, I just finished a massive big season. We won the European Cup. We won the Champions League. And now I'm having 7 weeks off. And off they go to Jamaica and party for 7 weeks. And, they come back to Manchester United or Juventus, wherever they're playing, an absolute, fucking mess. And it takes the coach there like 6 weeks to get him even, nose above water level. And then the season starts. And then they wonder why they get hamstring injuries and, and groin injuries and so forth. I mean, so I think, you've got to have those athletes they've got to realise that that's the ambition level. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a big expert on all the guys in the NFL, but somebody like Tom Brady, why is he doing what he's doing at his age?
He's intrinsically motivated. There's something intrinsic going on. It's not to do with money anymore.
Well, from a physical standpoint, he's got great fucking protection. That's for damn sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. There's no doubt about that. He's got protection, but at the same time, the guy, he prepares himself, and you've got to be able to do that, because there are other guys out there that've got great protection.
Well, but this plays into my thought process where he doesn't do anything for performance enhancement, in my opinion. All he does is he allows himself to feel good every single day. That's his goal. Do I feel good? Are my muscles feeling good? They talk about pliability. A couple of my guys have been to TB12, and what do they do? A handful of my guys have been to TB12, and essentially a lot of their stuff is just based off of making sure the muscle feels good. There's a lot of hands-on work. It's massage, and this makes me think like, well, who the fuck cares about performance? Because these are the best athletes in the fucking world. Just let them go out there and be themselves and stay out of their fucking way. So it's like, what does it even matter what we do? One thing
that I've discussed with a few people, and I know there are a couple of guys doing that here in the hockey league, and that is that if you look at a career, these guys are going to have a fairly you don't plan to get injured. So what I suggested to them, I said, look, okay, why don't you have the approach where, let's say, every second year, you use that, and you make sure that no matter what, when the season finishes and then until the season starts, you are 100% committed to use that whole period to do a big build-up, because that's going to carry you over a lot further, rather than sort of doing the normal where you don't do anything, just the normal sort of 6 weeks camp and then straight into the season.
Who are you talking to? You talking to a real professional athlete, or are you talking to a guy trying to make money? Because once these motherfuckers that make money get that opportunity, you know what they're doing? They're going to Turks and Caicos for 2 fucking weeks. Yeah. And then they're taking a week off when they come home. Bro, like this ain't reality. Ideal. If you were in my position, you'd pull your fucking hair out.
Yeah, I know. And that is, that's the whole thing. But what I said to them was, I said, look, if you're going to be in this sport and you guys are making big money, but if you want to make big money for a long period of time, you need to look after the thing that's enabling you to do that. That's the old bod. So you can't keep sort of slogging away doing what you're doing, because it needs time to get a little bit of a different level. So you're going to have to allow yourself some time. If you don't do it over a whole period of a year, then at least every second year, do a complete bloody build-up. And, a couple of guys I know that are doing it, and they've been doing it now for probably going on, it'd be about 3 or 4 times. So they've been doing it now for about 10 years. So it's about 2010. And it's working well for them. But then again, it's what I fully agree with you. Once these guys starts making these big dollars, it's Turks and Caicos. Hello.
Or Ibiza.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, here it is, yeah.
and talking about that, boys, I've got to love you and leave you, because I've got to go and enjoy my fucking holiday right now. I would love to keep going, but I've got a boogie. Rolf, it's always a pleasure with you, mate. It's always a big pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yep, no worries, mate.